Hello, and welcome to another edition of Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm John Schaefer, and today I'm painting some X-Wing ships. I have chosen to repaint probably the most requested one when we polled people. People wanted to see Hera's RZ-1 A-Wing in her special scheme that is featured in her art. So I thought I would kind of go through that process, how I approach doing repaints of X-Wing ships in general. One thing to keep in mind is that the detail is the channels on there for the wash is very thin, so you have to do your layers relatively thinly and kind of consider how you want to overcoat your miniature. So I'm going to go ahead and switch cameras now, and we're going to get started on this whole process. So this is the A-Wing that I have here. I went ahead and I primed it ahead of time with a little bit of, with my airbrush, and I used a little bit of this Vallejo surface primer. It's a little bit thinner than a standard spray primer, but a regular spray primer will work just fine. You can even, if you wanted to, you could just hit up the ship ahead of time with a little bit of a matte varnish over top, but I would highly recommend that you keep the layers really light as you apply them, so you can make sure to keep a lot of the detail in there that's going to accept that wash as we go through and continue to paint. So yeah, I actually did get the audio to work a little bit better. I did a little troubleshooting and found out that there was a second audio source on one of my webcams that was also recording and giving crazy train Doppler effects. So anyway, let me know if there's any sort of issues with the sound or the feed so far, but so far so good. It seems like everything's working okay. So we got a lot to paint, so let's get started. I went ahead and I applied a base coat to the actual ship itself with this color called Nakar from Scale Color, and it's kind of like an off-white kind of color. Hold on one sec. Let me try to brighten this up just a little bit. Camera adjustment there. All right, cool. Yeah, so this is the Nakar is what I used for the base coat color, and I just kind of applied that here in the central stripe, like down the middle there. And also it has a little bit on the bottom as well. So that's going to provide like a nice basis for everything. I did cheat ahead of time, and I went ahead and I painted up all the base coat colors on here so we could actually get to the wash stages. I'll go through all these stages as well on this one, but I just kind of wanted to show you this is what we're shooting for at the end before we apply the wash over top. So these are all the kind of the base coat colors here for Hera's scheme. I think I will add maybe a little bit of cool stuff to the cockpit here, but we'll first things first. Let's show you how I go about painting some of these fine details in some of these designs. And I think that the key to that is you need to find a good base coat color that you can replicate, because you're going to use the same base coat color for to cut back into any of these designs. Like this ship has these little tiny red markings and like this little tiny those little white triangles off in the corners over here on the sides. And in order to paint those, I find it a lot easier, as opposed to painting a perfect triangle, paint the rough shape of the triangle and then use the base coat color, this gray for example, to shave into that design to tidy it up a little bit. I find that works out a lot easier. Instead of trying to paint these really fine points on this, I'll just paint a straight red line down it, and then take some of that base coat color, that Nakar that I used before, and then paint over top of that little section right there. Once we get past all of the base coat stages, the next stage after this is going to be applying a wash on top of it. As you're probably familiar with most X-Wing ships, it has like a deep black wash to define a lot of the recessed areas, and that is often achieved with an enamel-based wash or an oil wash. And the reason that you want to use that, we've kind of covered this, I talked about it a little bit in the Armada video we did last week, but before that, Will Schick also talked a little bit about using oil paints on Legion miniatures. And the idea there is that you're putting down layers of acrylic paint first, and you either seal it or you're light afterwards, but and then over top of that, you apply a wash in an oil-based paint. And when you do that, you can take a mineral spirit, turpentine, like anything else that you normally use to thin oil paints, and wipe away the raised areas, leaving that shade, that wash down in the cracks and the crevices without affecting the layer of acrylic paint underneath. it's just a real nice way to get a nice clean wash. I don't know if you've ever applied washes or shades over top of entire miniatures before, but sometimes like on those raised areas, you will get some pooling, some unnatural effects, and it starts to kind of obscure some of the detail that you got going on. So, and anyway, so we're jumping ahead a little bit. Right now, we've got a lot of little detail painting that we need to do. First, I'm just going to go ahead and apply some base coats. For that, I'm going to use a size 2 brush right here. I just like to use these larger brushes because they hold more paint. And after I've went ahead and applied that Nakar base coat, I'm going to start to map out the gray panels on the sides there. So we've got, just to remind you, you've got kind of like those two main areas. And as opposed to just painting the whole thing gray and then trying to paint that white over top, which is going to make the paint a lot thicker, I'm going to just try to paint those gray markings on the side there and on the top first, and then I'll shave into it with a little bit of white. So for that gray, it's a little bit darker than just like your standard medium gray. So I'm going to add a little bit of black to the standard. I don't even know it. I unfortunately have, I think it's just called gray from Scale Color. I have ripped off the label, so I can't tell you exactly what color it is, but it's about that 50-50 white and black mix. Okay, so I'm taking a little bit of that, and I'm just going to add just a little bit of this Grapheno gray into it, just make it a little bit darker. And there you go, graphene. And that's just like a darker, kind of deeper gray. Just to make this a little bit darker, I'll show you my palette here in a second. I haven't set up a palette cam, but I'm thinking more and more about that, just to make this process a little bit easier for you guys to see. Okay, and I will bring up the palette here, so you can see here. This is this is the graphene. This is the other color. This is the mix that I made, and I made a generous amount of this stuff, and I'm using it on a wet palette here, so it should keep this nice and wet as I continue to work on the ship. So it's what I like to do when I am trying to plot all these things out and I have a symmetrical pattern here is I like to just put out like plot points. So I look at the ship, I look at my reference, and then I just like, okay, well this is going to go up to here, so I'm going to put a little plot point there. And then it's going to curve down to about here, and then it's going to tidy in and connect right about here. So between all those things, now I can just go over to the other side, I can map out those plot points as well. There, right there, and then another one up here. And now I can just kind of connect the dots, and I have something that is a little bit easier for me to trace and follow. So the other little bit about this particular design is it comes in from the fin here. So I'm going to have a plot point that I'm going to put in that's going to go right to right here. So it's right up above this. So another plot point right there. So we've got all these, so now I can just go through here and kind of carefully connect these dots. And again, I'm not like too worried about being super precise with this right now because I mostly just want to make sure that my paint is nice and thin. I'm getting any of these little greebles or any of this other stuff out of here pretty well. And I'm just getting the rough shape down as well as I possibly can. Because I'm going to use these other paints around it to shave into this color afterwards. So that's a little messy. I obviously went outside the lines a little bit. Not worried about that right now. We're gonna fix that here in a second. So I got another plot point I'm going to put right here. I'm going to connect these guys like this. Go down here, and we'll just connect up to here like this. Right. Yeah, I really like this paint scheme too. It's super cool. That's why I have painted it twice, or will have painted it twice anyway. It is really neat, and I love Hera as a character. I think she's very, very cool. I think her ability is going to be great next wing. If you guys haven't seen what she does, she kind of passes off tokens and locks to other friendly ships. She's like really kind of playing up that whole Phoenix leader kind of role, like guiding the other ships of Phoenix Squadron. Very excited about all that stuff. We'll be talking about those squadron packs along with a lot of other stuff next week. Don't forget we got the mini extravaganza happening. We got lots and lots of stuff planned for you guys. We're working very hard to get it all together for you. So yeah, we definitely are looking forward to sharing all the awesomeness with you guys next week. Okay, so the next part here is that there's a slight little band right here on the side. We want to leave this the whole color, so that's going to be the edge of the gray stripe here. And then this part goes straight down. I can show you here. So this is kind of where we're at. So this is you know, we're doing that other gray area over there on the side. So I'm going to map that out. And I like to use one color and just pretty much get everything kind of like mapped out and nice and flat and clean. And then I'll go back in with that second color and I'll shave into this design to make it exactly how I want it. And this line just goes pretty much straight down. So I'm just going to try to, I find that, you know, sometimes just working with a real smooth motion like that will help you get a nice clean straight line. So don't be afraid to move a little bit quickly. I think the more time that you're, you know, making really slow, deliberate marks, sometimes your general jitter just kind of gets there in a little bit, and it will kind of affect the overall quality of it. So let's get it all lined up, and then just go boom, just straight down, just with some confidence. Paint with confidence, and then touch it up when you make mistakes. Okay, over here on this other side, we're going to do the same sitch. So we're going to leave that one little panel line right there clear. And then there's this panel line right here, and that kind of denotes the edge of this mark. And not every time do the markings of the ship match up with the panel lines, but when they do, I highly recommend that you utilize those edges to define these shapes, because when you apply the wash afterwards, it's just going to make a darker line right across it. All right, so I'm going to continue with this. And here, again, just, you know, apply another coat here, just like thin, gradual coats over top of this is going to be what you really want to shoot for to make sure that you can retain some of that tooth to the detail. Okay, and then lastly, there is a little stripe here in the middle, the back right here. This goes on either side. That goes pretty much right up to the cockpit. Yeah, Mephistone, that is definitely a very good tip. I think that, you know, whenever you're painting, especially this teeny tiny stuff, like you always want to try to figure out a good way to like brace your hands together to make it as comfortable as possible. For me, I'd make a bridge between, you know, the hand that I'm holding things, and I just use an X-Wing stand to hold these X-Wing ships. I think that that's like, it's great. It's really nice because you can pop it off this base if you need to, and you can flip it upside down. You can get in here and you can paint all this stuff relatively easily without having to hold on to it. You know, just sacrifice a couple X-Wing bases to the painting gods in order to have yourself a nice little handle for these guys. But yeah, as Mephistone was mentioning, like when you are like, you know, really kind of bridging your hands together, and then also like choking way up on the brush. I mean, I've mentioned this several times, like this is just going to give you more precision, more control. And then I move this thing around in order to match what motion is very comfortable and controllable with my hand. So I will, you know, adjust this this miniature here and just turn it so I can just kind of keep doing this motion as I'm painting, because I have the most control that way. And then I just adjust this, as opposed to just always trying to like come at this thing at different angles where I have a little bit less motor control. So yeah, definitely a great tip. And if you are, you know, looking to repaint some X-Wings for the very first time, yeah, give it a shot. I think that, you know, I have the, you can see right here, I got the bridge. I got the two hands connected, even just with a finger, a pinky to an index finger. But that's enough to give me enough stability. And then I've got, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got kind of like a little thing that I brace this on just to keep it in frame on the camera. And that's kind of held down as well. So one word of caution, if you're painting with some buddies or whatever, just be wary that if you've got your elbows on the table, sometimes they'll kick the table and you'll just jerk and make some stray marks there. So sometimes it's a good idea to keep your elbows up off the table when you're painting with buddies. Okay, we got some gray marks on there. Cool, so now I'm gonna just show you just a little bit of the general touch up here. Again, we're gonna use our base coat color, that Nakar that we have. And I'm just gonna fix these little areas where I messed up. Just try to make this a little bit cleaner across. Just a little bit over here too. All right, I think that is a decent start. Let's start to get some red on this one, because I think that's one of the most striking and cool colors in this overall scheme. For that, I'm going to use blood red, kind of a middle ground color. I think it's pretty accurate for what I'm shooting for here. It's a nice scarlet. And this ship has got, let's see here, it's got some kind of like the lower fin is kind of got a diagonal area there, and then you've got the full red fins on the top, a couple little accent marks, and then those marks down on the front are going to be probably one of the more challenging things we have to do, but we're going to see where we get with them. But I'm going to start off with these fins in the back because I think that they are just a little bit easier and to approach, and I'll feel like I'm getting more done that way. Medium bases. Oh, sorry, just getting caught up with the chat. Just kind of reading over there, seeing what's going on. Looks like you guys are talking about medium-sized colored bases. I do not know very much about the status of that stuff. Wish I could say more. But it's surprising. Some people really like those colored bases. I personally like just like the clear ones, because I think it matches just about any playmat you decide to use, and I use a lot of different ones when I play X-Wing and Armada and stuff. Yeah, if we do medium bases, we'd have to do epic bases, all sorts of stuff, right? We got to do it all if we're going to do some of it. But those bases came out before medium-sized ships even existed. Right. Getting over here and getting this other fin done. And see, again, like I'm just turning the ship. I'm keeping my hand pretty much in the same spot for most of the stream, and I'm just turning the ship around to like match the angle, and it's just easier for me to retain that control. Right, get in here and do this inner side over here. It's just a little bit too thick. There's one thing you definitely do need to keep in mind is just the thickness of your paints. You just think you have to be a little bit more patient when you paint X-Wing ships. You just want to do it in fewer, thinner coats. I'm sorry, multiple thin coats, as opposed to just trying to like get that maximum coverage the first time around, because you really want to make sure that you don't obscure those channels as much as possible. That is if you want to, utilize a wash very heavily. If you decide that you just want to go in and like base coat and highlight all this stuff, kind of like a traditional miniature, then it's less important that you keep those channels clear to be able to receive the wash, but it still helps. Just it's that added extra little bit of detail that really makes these ships shine, I think. Like there's a lot of attention to detail from the sculptors when it comes to the little greebles and little details on these. And I've gone a little bit outside the lines there on that jet engine, but I'm not worried about it because I'm going to paint over it in a sec. Cool. Okay, now we're going to go down and do these lower fins. And looking at it, it looks like this is kind of, it goes pretty much right from that, right from the ring right here in a diagonal line. It kind of goes right in between. There's like a little dot right here, and it goes right from there right down to the side. So I'm just going to try to replicate that. So I'm drawing right from here. Oops. Whatever, I'll touch that up. So let's get that in focus there. You can see a little bit better. There we go. Okay, we're going to go right from here, right down like that. Fill all that. And same situation over here. And for this, if you're trying to match something on one side over to the other side, I recommend that you just go ahead and fill out the bottom side of it so it goes and it wraps around a little bit, and now you can see where the connection point is going to be over on this side. So because I put that little rounded red along the bottom side of it, lined up right where the edge of that that line is, now I can just go over on this side, and now I can just draw a line right from there to right there, and it should be pretty accurate on both sides, pretty much in the same spot. Or close enough that Nobody will notice. Cool. Over and do this. Oh, one thing to note is that when I did go through and I primed this thing, I left the yellow engines on the stock because that's kind of a hard little detail to reach. So when I was priming, I just kind of like angled this thing so I was like shooting over it this way as opposed to like going straight onto it from the back, and that just enabled those the engines to stay in there because they're just a hard little detail to paint by hand. And I'm trying to save myself a little time. Yeah, you could totally wrap this thing in a clear thing. I just have these kind of older bases that I use for repaints, so I wasn't too worried about it. But yeah, you could definitely do that. I did something very similar to that for the flight stand for this little droid. Whoops. Kind of wrap that whole thing up in tape. It's got a little bit of sticky stuff still on there that I got to clean off. But yeah, same basic principle. Working with clear parts like that is requires a little bit of special consideration, a little bit of forethought, but I think it makes the end product look great if you can keep the rods nice and clear and clean. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. At this point, I actually have this lower panel to use as a reference, so I can kind of just see like, okay, well, it goes into about right there. And again, kind of plotting out the point from this point right down to it, and then we'll just fill in the back. Yeah, I think that plot point technique is something that has really helped the symmetry of a lot of the designs when I'm working on ships. And most Star Wars ships have a very symmetrical paint scheme. So by and large, there's a few little details and things that'll be a little unique. Okay, and then I'm just going to use the same technique I used before. So I see where this thing goes down on the bottom. I'm going to pull it over around the edge. Try to keep that in frame there. So now it's gone over enough that I can see where that thing extends. And now I can just draw a straight line to connect the two right down into it. If I messed up a little bit, I can always just kind of shave back into that with that base coat color. So that's definitely why I like to use, just straight base coats and just get all of these designs painted, because it's just so much easier when you have a pre-mixed color that's already going to match all the other areas around it for touch-up and just refinement of some of these details, as opposed to like applying washes and shades and highlights and things over top of stuff and then trying to do the detailed markings over top. You're just going to have so much variation in the hull color that it's going to be hard to get it to match. Yeah, do not prime using that textured paint. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work out very well for you. Unless you want to have like a junky asteroid of a ship. Okay, next, we've got these green engines right here. So that's kind of like the next most defining color. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to save those little red bits on there because it takes a little bit extra time, and I'd like to get through a lot more on the miniature first before we dive into some little detail painting there. So I'm going to go ahead and paint those engines. For that, it's kind of a color that I don't have like right out of the pot, so I'm going to have to mix up this kind of green. And in order to do that, I'm taking slightly more saturated green. That is this yellow green from Vallejo. I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of a darker one. So this is Ardennis green. Yeah, Ardennis green from Scale Color. And you can see that this is obviously a little bit darker, a little less saturated, more neutral. I think the combination of these two might get me where I want. I might have to mix in some more gray to further neutralize it. I don't know. What's the verb there? Who knows? To make it less bright and saturated. Okay, so I'm going to mix this up a little bit. We're going to see how this looks, and I'll show you my palette here in a minute. Ooh, I can already tell that this is looking a little bit too yellow and too green for my tastes. That's just a little bit too saturated. So I'm going to dull that back down. I'm just going to use a color that I already have here. I'm going to use this gray, this lighter gray. I'm just going to mix that in there a little bit, see how that goes. And I'm going to mix up a generous amount because I want to use this color across a significant part of the miniature itself. And I'm using a wet palette that'll enable these colors to stay a little bit wetter, a little bit longer. That's still looking a little bit too too light, so I'm going to mix a little bit of this darker gray into it. And if you're going to do a whole bunch of ships in a similar scheme, you might just want to mix up a whole pot of paint for this if you have a custom color involved. But I like finding one straight out of the pot because it's if I ever run out or if I ever want to come back to that scheme later and do something, I can always mix them up or use that stock color in order to match things. Okay, that's looking a little better. We'll try that. Okay, let me just mix up a generous amount of this on my palette so I have some more of it to go back to. All right, let's get in here and paint some engines. So the engines are largely green. There's some little yellow panels on there. I'm going to try to dodge around those as much as I can. So you can see here that you've got this kind of ochre color towards the back of the engines there, and like those little panels. I'm gonna dodge around those because it'll be easier to paint that that ochre color over top of white than it will be over top of this green. Yellow just doesn't have the coverage that you really want. So there is a little stripe that's right back here, right before the engines. So I'm just going to try to skip that as much as I can. And we'll just touch up those areas where we made mistakes before. And then there's another little ochre panel down there, but we'll dodge around that. That up to the edge there. And if you want, you can certainly, again, I'm not really thinning down these paints like in a lot of the other tutorials that we do, where we're kind of approaching this stuff like washes more than anything. And that's mostly because I just want nice flat colors that are easy to replicate, for all the detail work. But you could, if you wanted to, I mean, you could certainly like take this same paint, thin it way down and like paint it over top of all this stuff and do that very kind of like washy approach. And it's kind of nice because it defines a lot of the detail and stuff for you, but it's kind of up to you and which method you want to do it. I'm kind of approaching this in the same way that we paint our miniatures from the factory, in which we kind of base coat everything and then apply a wash afterwards. Ooh, a mediocre. Man, I don't know if I would call it that, Will. I think I would choose other words. Those words are great, but not my style. Anyway, yeah, just want to show you the contrast. That's kind of the wash technique, just allowing the paint to kind of pool up in the recesses, and then this is going to be the more flat version, which we'll touch up. And then after that other side dries, I'll touch that guy up too. Go through there and do all those bits. All these guns I think are green. Yep, things are green here on the edge, so I'll go through and paint those as well. Right. Go and get on that side as well. So this is kind of the first X-Wing based painting stream that we've ever really done. What kind of X-Wing stuff would you guys like to see in the future? I think that like personal projects that I would kind of like to do, something I've always wanted to do that I've seen on a few gaming tables is 3D asteroids. Like actually like using the templates from the game, but making like a little removable asteroid that you can take off that just makes the overall table just look, more like a battlefield, a little bit more 3D and integrated, but doesn't interfere with the gameplay because you can just pick up the 3D asteroid and move it out of the way. I think that would be very cool. Guy of the 80s, they are going to be talking about what's coming up for X-Wing next week. And there's a panel talk. There is an X-Wing 101 kind of stream in which we're going to bust open the squadron packs and get some of these pilots out on the table for some new players and kind of talk about them. But yeah, there's going to be some new stuff. There's some additional cards from the squadron packs that we haven't shown off yet. There is a whole bunch of stuff from the Armada Wave 10 that we haven't shown off yet. There's some stuff on the horizon that we haven't shown off. Yeah, there's lots of things to talk about. Hopefully you can join us next week or get caught up after the fact to see what we have planned. Okay. This green nice and flat on here. And then we've got kind of a burnt orange. Firekite 2002. Will there ever be any in-painted ships sold? Do you mean like non-painted ships? Like just providing like just bare plastic? 8 of 2 repaint. That would be pretty sweet. I like Plo Koon's scheme quite a bit. I think that one's very cool. I haven't seen that applied to an 8 of 2 yet. I've seen it on the Delta 7, but that has that kind of like cool rising sun kind of look to it. It's all these like white marks over top of a blue base coat. That would be pretty sweet. I like Plo Koon a lot. I could definitely paint up his 8 of 2. That would be very cool. I think there's some huge ships that I wouldn't mind repainting. Kind of want to do a was it the Broken Horn version of the Sea Rock? I'm trying to remember who the main guy was. That Visago, Sicatro Visago. I think that was his ship. I might be wrong. You guys are probably gonna fact check me and tell me I'm way off. Did Plo only fly a Delta? Yeah, that's too bad. But you know, if you're repainting your ships, do what you want, you know. Okay, for this kind of rusty orange, I've chosen orange leather from Scale Color. It's a nice kind of neutral, almost kind of rusty orange color. And we're using that for these rear braces around the jet engines. Go there and paint all these. And then also this very last little section back here has also got that color in it. Right before the engine terminates before the second part. Sabine's A-Wing? Yeah, that would be sweet. We'll be showing off that card pretty soon. Right. Go through there and get all these bits done. Make sure to get in and turn this thing upside down and get on the underside of each of these things to get on the whole interior of the ring. Over there. So how many points is Vader's Defender? Boy, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do. I do. Why deny it? Yeah, Vader's going to be in a Defender. He is going to be very expensive. How many points do you think he's going to be? What do you think is the fair points cost for Vader? I'm curious what you guys think. His ability is pretty bananas, but he's a bit of a glass cannon. He can't use the force for defense. $110, $100, $99, $125, at least $150. Interesting. He's not going to be cheap, I will tell you that. But we will be updating the points list, the squad builder, all that stuff as we get closer to the release at the end of this month. So we'll let you guys know. We'll post it on social. You guys can check out all the new points and see what slots certain ships have and all that cool stuff. They might even talk a little bit about that stuff next week. But we typically put up those points the Monday before release, which would be the 21st, I think. I think that's the Monday after the Hobby Extravaganza. 22nd? I'm not sure. I don't have a calendar in front of me. Right. Yeah, he's still in a Defender. That is no joke of a ship. Very durable. Plus, you've got the new TIE Defender Elite title. You can double tap and shoot people twice. And yes, there is a lot of shenanigans that can be done. But I think a lot of the other pilots in the Sky Strike Academy are also super cool. And we will be having an article about Vader and the Defender specifically, with some notes from the developer, and talk about the tactics and how it's going to integrate into the game. Yeah, that stuff will be coming here pretty soon. Some more information forthcoming about Vader. We'll just have to be patient a little bit. Yeah, Brooks writes a great article. I like a lot of his stuff. Definitely helped out a lot with some of the recent Squadron Pack articles, and I think just the insight from the designers is always great. It's awesome to like kind of hear what they were thinking about at the time and what they had planned. We look forward to doing that in the future. I know there's going to be like some really cool panels, where we're getting all the people to talk about, just design philosophy, sculpting, art. Like there's so many different aspects that go into these games that, we don't really talk that much about. And I think that, the fans of these games, they'll find that stuff super interesting. So yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy it. I can't say if we're going to start a forum or not. I don't know what the plan is for that. I think that, forums in general are kind of a cumbersome thing. They certainly serve their purpose, but there's also like so many different ways that people can interact and talk, and keep up in a social way without having to have a kind of a curated thing from the company. But who knows? I mean, I think anything is possible. But for now, we do not have plans for a forum. I think that we're busy working on a new website, a lot of new features and things on it. First things first. Well, you can actually play X-Wing without buying the core set if you don't want it. The rules are available online. The damage deck you can purchase separately. We sell a set of deluxe movement templates, or you can use your first edition versions. But I like the second edition movement templates a little bit better because they have that central line on them that helps you align your ships a little bit better. Okay, next little bit, I'm going to go in here and paint in a little bit of this yellow. And for that, I am using another scale color. It is Sahara Yellow. Right here, it's a nice kind of dingy, but not meaty ochre. Thank you, Will. I have a feeling it's going to become a thing now. All right, so we're going to mix up a little bit of this. We're going to paint that little stripe that is right before the engine back here. Get that little section in there. Trying to be careful not to hit that white underneath it as much as I can, because the touch up on that will be a little bit more cumbersome. It's a little bit too fat, but I'm going to shade back into that with the green. Oh, and I forgot to base coat over on this side. Make that a little bit darker, but that doesn't look too bad. Probably just go back in with another layer over top of it to smooth it out a little bit. Yellow in there. I do this up on this side a little bit. Dangerous beans. You're right, man. CIS list, they're where it's at. They are my favorite faction. I do like the Separatists. In all of our games, actually, they are my favorite. I love a droid. What I'm painting in Legion. I'm super stoked about the next wave of Armada. It's got the Invisible Hand. It's got the Rekizan in it. It's got super cool characters in there. Yeah, looking forward to showing all that stuff off to you next week. We're gonna get that little panel, and we'll get this one down here too. Because I know I'm going to come back into this with a little bit of that green again. I'm not like super precious about being ultimately accurate here because I just know I'm going to touch it up anyway. Cool. Okay. All right, I'll go back in with that green. Head up these panels. We got about 20 minutes left. You can see it takes a little bit of time to like do all this base coating. And that is why I prepped a second ship, just so I can kind of show you the wash stage of it. But there is one thing that I do want to do to this ship before I transfer over. And that is show you a little bit about how to do those panel lines up in the front and just shaving into them. Just because it's, you know, there's a lot of X-Wing ships that have like really tiny, like slight racing stripes, etc. on there as part of their scheme. That seems to be a very popular thing for Lucasfilm. I think it looks great, but it's yeah, it's a tricky thing to paint with such a tiny ship. Okay. Dangerous Beans. I like that username. That's good stuff. Yeah, vultures, man. I haven't found like a ton of time to like do entire forces for X-Wing. I just kind of like do selective ships here and there. But I am like seriously thinking about going in like really heavy. And I think I mentioned this last stream about the mining guild. I think the mining guild is like super interesting. I like that kind of real world utilitarian aspect of Star Wars. Like, you know, just, you know, somebody's got to do the mining, and there's a guild that like manages it all, and they've got this cool yellow color scheme, and they're made up of all these kind of scum and villainy guys that are very cool. So yeah, just doing like a whole bunch of cool scum ships in that yellow and black scheme with their symbol on there and stuff. That appeals to me. Okay, so let's move over to these racing stripes because I've been talking about them a little bit. So these are a little bit more detailed. I'm going to use a smaller brush for this. I'm going to go down to a size 1. Something that's got a good point on it, but still has a bit of a belly in there to hold the paint. The miners aren't old enough to get a space pilot license. Got jokes. First time caller. Even your name has got puns up in it. Okay, going back in here to a little bit of this red. All right, so again, I'm gonna look at my example. I did, you know, I'm not staring directly at a reference. I'm just kind of using the ship, but I did stare at a reference pretty hard when I was painting this one. So again, I'm just gonna kind of plot out those lines. I'm gonna look at this thing first. So look at it in relation to this kind of central shape here. This kind of like Gothic window. I don't know what you want to call it, but a pointed box. So it looks like our point starts like right here. Right there. I'm going to put a little tiny mark there, and it goes straight down to like right about here. Right about at that point. So again, I'm going to also plot out those points over here. So I just like to map out this stuff first, paint it in broad strokes, so to speak, so I can just make sure that I don't spend a lot of time getting one just right and then realize it's in the wrong place. And then we've got another, you know, a little bit up here too. Thin down this paint a little bit. It does help to thin down the paint a little bit when you're doing these plot points, just so you don't put a little dollop of paint on there that creates a little raised surface. All right, so it goes to there, and then it pretty much just goes down like right along the side and then tapers into this thing. So I can almost just like paint that line right now. And the most important thing for me right now, because I know I'm going to shave into this, is that it just has kind of like a consistent width from left to right. And I'm not too worried that it's going to go a little bit further than I want it to, because I'm just going to touch it up. Like I'm going to shave back into that to make that look closer to what I want. All right, we'll get this guy out of the way. And now we're gonna, you know, plot down, do this next line here. So this is, again, I'm just gonna try to go with this with a bit of confidence. I'm gonna try to do a nice straight line. I'm gonna line my brush up here. I'm gonna get it positioned just so I can just do a straight pull straight down like that. And I'm just gonna line it up, and I'm just gonna go for it. That's pretty straight, not bad. A little off. And same thing here, just straight down. A little off. Oh boy, that wasn't very good. Do as I say, not as I do. But anyway, this is again why we're using a nice solid base coat to shave into these marks and make them tidy. Yeah, this is way fatter than I wanted. But that's cool. I will be completely honest, this is like not the best position for me to paint in. It gives me the most accuracy, so it's I find that I'm a little bit off, but no worries. Okay, going back in with that in a car, make sure to wash out your brush really well. You don't want any little bit of red on your brush because it's going to just make this little pink halo around this stuff, and that's not what you want. Going back in with that base coat color. And now this kind of travels in from this side here, so I'm just going to pull that down and just kind of shave that off a little bit. So you're getting a more decent point. And then any area on this line that just went a little bit too wide, I'm just going to shave into it again. You can also use this basic approach when you're doing like edge highlights on armor panels and things, like if you're painting, say, clones or something like that. You know, just having a nice solid base coat color, you put on your edge highlight, maybe it's way fat and it's like looks a little wonky and weird. We'll just go back into the base coat color, just shave into it, tidy it up. I think it's a lot less stressful to just spend that extra time on that step than just trying to be perfect the first pass. But you know, some people just like they really just want to nail it the first time. However you want to do it. But that's how I do it. Is I just have this general touch-up step that I factor in the overall paint scheme. Okay, so we're going to look over here on this other side. We're going to shave into this one as well. So I'm just going to try to eyeball it as well as I can. You have to watch how wet the paint is before you cut in. That seemed really fast. I think you do a little bit. I think I will typically make sure that my base coat color, like that red, was dry. And you can tell that, like if you just turn it a little bit, you can see if there's a little sheen on the paint. As long as it's pretty flat. These paints that I'm using too are also really matte, really flat. So the transition from wet paint to dry paint is pretty dramatic and pretty noticeable. So it's yeah, it works out all right for me. So, but yeah, you definitely want to make sure before you cut in, because if you don't, you're just going to get a pink mess. You know, like it's, you know, those colors are going to mix and it's going to get a little wonky. All right, shave into that a little bit. All right, we've got about 12 minutes left, so I'm not going to spend too much more time on this, but I just kind of wanted to show you the general approach here of just using a base coat color and, you know, just tidying up your lines by erasing into them a little bit with the base. Okay, and then the tops of these also kind of angle in a little bit here like this. On this side too. Okay, well, I would just kind of continue to go back and forth, touch the stuff up a little bit as I proceeded. Also notice that I have kind of like a section here on this gray that is a little bit darker than the others. I think I just wasn't very careful when I was grabbing my mixed color. I'll try to mix up a little bit more of something to match and just smooth that out. Just general touch-ups and things. And I won't have time to go through and paint the bottom of this ship, but I will show you what the scheme looks like because we've got references that shows all that stuff. And the bottom of the ship has got a, I'll just show it to you now. So you've got kind of a green panel along the bottom. It's in a little bit. Oh, here. Let me turn on this extra light. This will probably make it look a little. So you've got this kind of like green panel that's in the center part right here, and then this gray kind of matches what's going on the top, but you don't have this white section in it. So it kind of extends down below, and then you've got a central section here that is that kind of off-white color underneath. Yeah, and that's more or less what the base coat color for the scheme looks like. I think I noticed like with this one in particular, like I was going over top of a ship that had a kind of a thick wash on it. I think it was one that I had actually repainted before. So it's a little bit, the detail's a little bit filled in here, but we'll try to fix it as well as we can. One little bit that I do want to do here, I want to show you how I do kind of a different cockpit. So we typically, like with the production ships, we just use like this kind of gloss black, and that would just be you paint it all with black and then use a gloss varnish over top of it to get that kind of glass look to it. But I like to sometimes paint in kind of like more of a bluish. What color would look sweet on this? Yeah, I'm just going to do kind of a blue. So for this, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do with a little bit of Caspian blue. It's a color that I really like. It's a little bit cyan. It's a little bit more neutral than that. Second, clean out my paint dropper. Okay, and for this is kind of more of a a general traditional kind of technique where we're gonna apply a little bit of this blue up here towards the top, have it fade down, and then you can kind of see like when the light reflects, you get this kind of like white reflection, the line that goes over top of things. I'm going to try to replicate some of that. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to paint a little bit of this blue up here on the top of the cockpit. I'm just going to try to feather that down a little bit into the black. By just taking my brush, I kind of clean the paint off of it, and now I'm just, pulling away at those edges to try to feather it down into the black below. You can use a second brush if you wanted to. I just didn't have a second brush handy, so I'm just using the same one. I just washed it off. Pull that down a little bit too. But I want it to be like a little bit brighter up here towards the top of the cockpit. Your ship might actually have a green cockpit now that I think about it, but this one's going to have a blue one. Need a paint by numbers class. Well, we're trying to make it easier for you guys. A big part of painting is just, it's kind of intimidating at first, but it's a huge part of it is just sitting down and doing it. Like there's nothing to it but to do it, right? Like you just get more comfortable with things over time. And I think that, there's a lot of general expectations that I have to paint at this level in order to do it at all. And it's just, you should never look at that. It's like, it's a journey of self-improvement. It's finding, fun and rewarding things about it. And no matter like what skill level you're at, like there's always something really fun about, exploring your own creativity when it comes to painting a ship or a character or what have you. So I've mixed in a little bit of black with that same color, and I'm going back down, and I'm just going to try to paint over that transition a little bit just to make this a little bit smoother. What we want is it to be like kind of lighter up at the very top of the cockpit and then just kind of fade down into black towards the edges. Try to like smooth this out a little bit as we go. You could certainly try to wet blend this, and that's essentially, using the two colors of paint over top of one another, or using a lot of transparency while the paint is still wet to smooth out the edges and blend two colors together. But I'm essentially just using one color and then painting over top of it with a mix to kind of smooth out those edges as well as I can. Now we're going to go just for a little bit lighter up here on the very top of this cockpit. Yeah, I got Vallejo and Scale 75 paints. That's pretty much what we use on stream all the time. I like them. They come in a little dropper bottle. They have great colors. A lot of cool stuff going on with those ranges. They airbrush really well. They have good levels of pigment in them. They have good coverage and like really, really diverse range of colors. A lot of different stuff you can play with. Okay, so we've got like a little bit of a fade there. I think I need to go a little bit lighter up towards the very top. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. I do think that I need to spend some time on this wash because I've been talking it up. I think is a final little bit here. I would probably just, apply like a little reflection line over top of things. Going with like a little straight bit of this color. I'll come back and revisit some cockpits. I feel like I didn't have enough time to like really get into, like a lot of technique on this one, but You can just kind of like put in like a little reflection line over top of it, which looks kind of cool. I think also having like one of those little reflection lines that kind of like follows the rounded parts up at the top is kind of nice too. So you can have something kind of like this. Just try to keep them kind of thin. And then like a coat of gloss varnish over top of that would look pretty sweet. Yeah, fast and dirty. All right, cool. So let's get to this wash part. We've been talking it up a little bit. So for that, I am going to use a little bit of black oil paint, and I'm going to thin it down with a little bit of mineral spirits. So I mentioned this before last time. The only thing you want to be careful about when it comes to oil paints is you don't want to get any type that says that it is like water mixable or water soluble or anything like that, because we're going to be using mineral spirits to thin this down and remove the paints. And if you apply any of those kind of colors, it just doesn't work as well. It just kind of stains a little bit more, and it just does some weird stuff. So when you are working with oil paints, use a junky brush. They're not very good to your brushes. They will be they're pretty aggressive. Like the mineral spirits themselves are pretty aggressive, and they can really dry out your brush and make them very brittle. So I do recommend that you use a brush that you don't care that much about, or you have one designated specifically for the task. Okay, so I've got some white spirit here, just from Art Supply Company, and I've taken some of my black oil paint, I've mixed it in there, and now I'm just going to take some of this white spirit. I'm going to mix it up into this until it is nice and thin. So this stuff smells. Oil paints do not smell very great. You can get odorless mineral spirits. That helps. There's some different stuff you can use. Or if you want to try to use this same sort of technique, I have some friends that swear by watercolors. It is a very similar kind of approach, where you can use a watercolor paint, you can paint in over the top of the stuff, and then it's still workable enough that you can take a damp brush and erase away some of those raised areas as much as you want. I do not have a lot of experience with that, but I am looking at doing it. Cool. So we're going to take this mixture here, and it should just kind of like fall into the cracks pretty well for us. But what I really want to do is try to paint this into those areas on the miniature that are kind of recessed, like those areas that are going to be going to want to accept this wash as much as possible. I'm going to try to dodge around the raised areas as much as I can. But if we get a little bit in those raised areas, again, not the end of the world, because we're going to be able to erase away at it with the mineral spirits afterwards. All right, that's a little bit too heavy, so I'm going to go back in here with a little bit of these spirits, and I'm just going to try to pull that away from that big raised engine section, so it just kind of stays down in the cracks as much as possible. And I'm using lamp black here as the paint color. And then these washes over here on this side, underneath here. And it's, a lot of this it's going to look really dirty at first. And that's where this kind of like second stage of removing a lot of this stuff comes in. If you're really concerned about it while you are working on it, you can go back in with a brush with just a little bit of the mineral spirits on it or the white spirit on it. And then you can just kind of erase away some of these spots. Just be careful that, if you didn't put a coat over top of this before you start to go at it, if you start to really pile on the mineral spirits, it'll start to eat away at that acrylic paint after a while, and you'll start to actually pull up some paint. So if I know that I'm going to be applying a pretty aggressive wash over top of the whole miniature, I like to hit it with a dull coat or a gloss varnish even. But again, you have to be careful with that, because if you go on too thick, it's going to obscure a lot of these little panel lines and stuff, and it's going to create more problems for you. Just dab a little bit of this in here. And this is going to look really dark at first, but it's, again, we're going to erase away a lot of this stuff. We want to just try to identify any of this, like these areas that have a little bit of tooth to them. Something that's going to accept that wash pretty well. I'll try to paint this over top of these areas as, slightly as I can. And then we'll just come back into it. All right. Center's there. we're starting to get some definition, some shadows and stuff. Like this fin is looking pretty cool, and it's looking a little glossy right now, but that's just because it hasn't dried yet. And if you wanted to, you could certainly, approach this with standard acrylic washes too. Like, if you're worried about oil paints and you're skeeved out a little bit about, new materials and new techniques and water and oil not mixing very well, then yeah, you can totally just do this with a standard wash. But it's like you would have to go back in and then re-base coat all of these areas, whereas I can just use a rag with some a little bit of thinner on it, mineral spirits or white spirits, and just erase away all this stuff from the raised areas. And it makes it a little bit more workable, a little less permanent, but it will still, once you apply a layer over top of a spray varnish, just like a matte varnish or something, it'll protect everything for you. This is a very useful technique for just speed painting stuff in general. And I'm just going to be a little bit more liberal here on the bottom because it's going to be a little darker to begin with, and I'm not too worried about people really seeing it. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed through applying it all. All right. We're going to go a little bit over on time just so I can show you a little bit of the erasing of this stuff over top. And a little bit of that. Okay, so it's looking pretty dirty and pretty junky right now. So let's try to clean it up a little bit. So for this, I like to use, you can either use like a shop towel, you can use a Q-tip if you want to. I find that, a standard Q-tip sometimes gets a little bit too fibery, I guess, if that's a word, where, like little fibers from the Q-tip will kind of get stuck on the miniature. But, it's kind of whatever you want to use. Let me grab a towel here real quick. Alternatively, there are, some model companies that actually make these like kind of precision cotton swabs just for this specific purpose, and that they are pretty handy. They're usually made by companies that specialize in like Japanese robot model kits, Gundams and stuff. Excuse me while I grab some supplies. Okay, so I just have a shop towel here with a little bit of that mineral spirit on the edge. I'm gonna dab away a little bit of the excess. And then I can just kind of like wipe away these raised areas a little bit and see how it just like polishes right up. And you can just dodge around. If you apply like a very light pressure, it should just try to stay down in those cracks and crevices as well as you can, as well as it will. And then it's just a process of kind of going around and then just like adjusting and then reapplying a wash over top of things and just kind of going back and forth in this whole process. More on there so we can clean up this central bit. Yeah, and if I was painting this for myself, I would probably spend, 2, maybe 3 hours on it. Like obviously I didn't get through all of the steps, when I sat down to paint this ship by hand. But it's yeah, and this is something that you could set up like a whole squadron, at one time, and then just get all the base coats done, and then just do this this step on across all of them to do all the washes. But yeah, look it up online. There's a lot of different people that utilize this kind of oil wash technique using enamel washes or oil washes. They're kind of synonymous across a wide variety of different applications. And it's it's a technique that has been around since very early days of modeling. A lot of historical modelers have used it, and now a lot of miniatures painters are also doing it as well. Cool. So I will just kind of continue around this thing and just kind of tidy up those edges as well as I can, and kind of smooth this out, and we'll finally start to get it. So it's starting to look more and more clean. It looks very dirty right now, but it's just part of that cleanup process. All of this black that's on here is all just temporary, right? Like you can apply more and more pressure to actually remove any bit of it, but you can see that you do need to keep the channels intact as well as you can, so it can actually hold that wash in there. Then I'm just going to use the this little tool here just to kind of show you, these kind of things are handy to get in there and get a little bit of this more recessed and hard to reach area in these spots. Okay, well that is a kind of quick and dirty way of repainting an X-Wing ship. You know, had I a little bit of extra time, I certainly would have gone into a little bit more. But this is kind of hopefully the first of a series of customizing your X-Wing collection. Maybe doing some terrain and stuff for it, doing some more repaints. Yeah, just in general, just getting creative with your X-Wing collection and personalizing it. I think that that's kind of like a fun thing that we don't really talk about very often. Thank you very much for joining me today. Just as a reminder, we will be coming back and doing the mini extravaganza next week. That's going to start on Thursday. It's going to be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday next week. We're pretty much streaming all day long. We're going to have a ton of reveals, a lot of panels, a lot of insight into the company. You're going to meet a lot of staff. It's going to be a super good time. So we hope you guys can join us. Thanks again for taking the time to watch me paint some spaceships for a little while. I hope you all have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.